Okay, so I actually work as a integrative therapist, a psychologist, and a coach. So creativity is very important because every individual is very different, and it's about using creative methods to try and help them to just develop a better relationship with themselves. So what works for one person won't work for another person. So you need to be very creative and really just work with that individual to find out how you can help them. And sometimes people are more right brain than they are left brain, and yeah, writing things down will help with them. Sometimes people will like to see things visually, so it's about working with that person and really understanding what will work for them.
Okay, and how is creativity in the way that you use it, how is it different from effective communication? Because what you're describing in terms of how you relate to your clients and meet their needs, someone could say, well, that's communication, that's being effective in the way we communicate with each other.
So creativity, it depends how you define it. So creativity for me is really bringing in objects, using things, and using your imagination as well. So if for example someone is going through something with a self-esteem issue, for example, rather than talking about it, effectively communicating with that person, it might be difficult for them to speak about an emotion. But if you externalize it, you create character, you use some sort of like therapy, as in like play therapy, or you're introducing something different into the environment, it helps them to see the situation that we're talking about in a different manner. So that's using creativity in that way. It's like a lot of the time with kids, when I'm working with children and helping them to understand, yeah, with effective communication, you can talk to them about things, but there's a lot of research out there that suggests that when you're working with children, they prefer things, they're more hands-on, and when they're hands-on, they learn things like using marbles, using sand, using play therapy. There's so many different types of therapies out there, but it's, again, really trying to understand what the individual needs. So learning and creativity, I think they go hand in hand. Again, when you're learning something, if you're teaching a child 5 add 5, and you're trying to say to them, look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you add another 5, and that makes 10. It's very difficult for them to understand that. So you articulate it in a way where you physically have like 5 sweets, and you help them to empathize, help them to learn from their own understanding. So you're seeing them from what they're seeing from their perspective, and that's what you're allowing them. Then you're creating something to help them understand from their perspective, if that makes sense. So say, for example, with children, using the understanding of the sweet situation. Yeah, there's 5 sweets here, there's 5 sweets, and then I give you another 5. So how many have you got now? So you're helping them to not only communicate and to learn there, but you're also bringing in the creativity.
Right. Okay, as a teacher myself, I often found it very easy to be creative in the way that you express, but I found it a lot more challenging to help my students to be creative themselves, because there's a difference in being creative and or teaching creatively as opposed to teaching for creativity. Do you find that as well, that even though you are being very creative yourself in the way you are communicating with your clients, in the way that you're allowing them to learn different things, how is it that you're actually teaching them to be more creative themselves?
I think you're allowing them to be themselves. You're really just letting them be who they want to be, and by doing that, they really connect with themselves. And because you're conditioned as a child, you're conditioned to be this way or do things this way. And sometimes parents and teachers, it's not blaming anyone, it's not saying that it's someone else's fault, but they influence the way that we learn, or the way that we think that we need to learn. But actually in the space that I give my clients is that I allow them to just be themselves. So if they are more creative, it's like, oh yeah, but I do have this side, and they may find it very difficult to start off with, to really connect with that. But the more that they connect with it, then the more that they're tuned into that, because that's who they are. They're just really connecting with who they are as an individual, and giving them the space to just learn about who they are without the conditioning side can change their lives, because it really just helps them connect with their creativity. But then on that note, everyone's creativity is different. So what one person may define as creative will be very different to another person's creativity. So one person might think creativity is like coloring and doing things with objects and things. Another person might say creativity is imagining things or taking things away and really reflecting on things. Another person might think journaling is creative. So it's very different for every individual.
Yes, so I learned that there needs to be this kind of clarity about what we mean when we're talking about creativity, because otherwise people can make all kinds of claims about creativity, but if they're defining it in their own unique way, their claim about creativity is not really going to be useful to someone who's defining it in a totally different way. So how is it that you actually define creativity?
When for myself, creativity is just allowing someone to be who they are. And that's my version of creativity. But for every individual, the way I allow them to really just tune into their own version of creativity is, again, allowing them to be who they are. Because if I'm saying creativity is someone who's coloring or someone who's doing this, I've already put them in a box saying that's creativity. But who am I to say that? Because from their perspective, creativity is something different, but it's for me as a facilitator, it's for me to understand and really learn and communicate with them and help them communicate what it means for them, and then for me to learn more about them as well, if that makes sense.
Yes, so it would seem that we're talking about self-expression, and this self-expression can take on unique forms. And my question would be, well, why don't we just call it self-expression? Why do we call it creativity?
Ooh, creativity. I still think creativity is a lot to do with the way that, like self-expression, yeah, I'm expressing myself, but being creative and then expressing myself, they're two different things, because being creative and expressing myself is really me creating the character that I want to bring out, whereas self-expression is perhaps I'm presenting myself. It's very similar, isn't it? I'm even now talking about is you expressing yourself from your self perspective, if that makes sense. That's actually a very interesting question, because creativity and self-expression they can be very similar and hand in hand.
Yes, and this is why, you know, in academia there needs to be this kind of consensus about, well, what are we talking about? Because people will say, well, not all art is creative, and you know, for some other people, everything that is artistic is almost synonymous with creativity, whereas of course it isn't. A lot of artists are not highly creative at all.
Yeah, but then you go down that route of how do you define creative and how do you define what's artistic? Everyone's perception is very different on what is artistic, what is creative, it all comes from their own perspective. Like, we could all look at one art piece and think that oh, that's not really creative, or that is creative, but then we're making that judgment based on our own experiences. So working in academia with children as well, having a class full of 12 to 20 children, and really working with them, they're all going to be working in different ways and learning in different ways. So how would you, as a teacher, as a facilitator, really facilitate all of that group to make sure that you're reaching all of them in that creative space? That's really important as a leader to be able to do that. Because if you're saying no, we're just going to be doing something on the whiteboard today, or we're just going to be doing PowerPoints, there's going to be people in the group who don't learn that way, or who aren't going to take anything away from that, because it's just going to go through their head, because it's not their way of processing.
Yes, that's right. And that's why I said earlier that for a lot of teachers, it's a lot easier for them to be creative, because indeed we have to be extremely creative these days to be able to meet the needs of a diverse range of students with very few resources. But do you find that creativity is often, the classroom is not really conducive to creativity, because we're working within these parameters and these limitations, whereas people need to be in different environments, maybe in nature, maybe they need to be shopping, or you know, not somewhere, not inside a confined space, for example a classroom or a workshop seminar room.
I can give it from my own perspective. I mean, I'm not a teacher, so I've worked in classroom settings before, but that's offering workshops on more mental health issues. But the way that I found that is that, yeah, you will have a classroom full of people and you'll be doing a task, and it might be creative, but then from the workshops that I've done, sometimes it's distressing for some individuals talking about certain emotions, and you find that they're drifting off, or that you're finding that they're laughing, or they're looking at someone else and laughing at what they're saying, and you're just like, okay, what's going on here then? But as a facilitator, I'm able to like just understand, okay, what's going on and work with the energies of the room. But I don't know if all teachers are able to do that. But I do believe what you just said there was that some people do prefer to be in nature. Like I know that I have clients and they prefer outdoors because it's fresh air and you're being in, you're in nature. It's like it takes you back to, grounding yourself. So some people like that. Some people like sitting on a sofa. Some people like just speaking over the phone. So everyone's individual, and it really is just trying to find out what suits everyone. But going back to the classroom situation, again, I can only give from my own experience of what I've done in the classroom and not speak for all teachers. But I do find that every individual will learn in a different way. And yeah, if everyone's together, are people not being given as much support that they could be given if they were in their environment that they needed? It's like put a rose and a daffodil and a sunflower together in one environment. All three need different environments. Now you put all three in one environment, some are going to strive and grow, and maybe the rose won't grow as well as it could do if it was put into the right nurtured environment. So that's the way that the children are, that's the way pupils are. They're all different flowers, and we need to nurture them in the right way.
I love that metaphor. I absolutely love that metaphor of the rose, the sunflower, and you know, every flower. Because you see, using that metaphor, I think the concept of, well, yes, everyone can be creative, but a sunflower is never going to be a rose.
Yeah.
Regardless of how hard it tries, it's always going to be a sunflower, and a rose is always going to be a rose. And also that they need different conditions. You know, if you plant a mango tree in the desert, it's not going to thrive like a palm tree will.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an excellent metaphor, that, you know, we are all different. We are, so therefore we are probably going to be creative in very different ways to each other, and we need different environments.
No, I completely agree.
In your life, have you noticed yourself that you are more creative in some environments compared with others?
Definitely notice that. Definitely, I'm more productive, more creative in certain environments. Like if for example, if I'm trying to do something in my bedroom, I won't be creative in there. I need to go into my own office space, and I've made that more creative. But also, if there's loads of distractions, I will get very distracted rather. I work really well in a coffee shop. I don't know what it is, don't know anyone there, but I will sit down and I will get so much work done. But that I tend to do that when I'm writing my blogs, when I'm doing more of my books. That's when I know that that's my space. But then when I need to be productive, phone calls, things like that, I know my space for that. But that's everyone's different in that. Some people, I know that I had some peers, and some people are like, I can't study in the library, I'm not going to get any revision done, I just need to lock myself away for a few weeks, and I'll get the exams done. So everyone's different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for everyone just to embrace creativity in their own way, and it's okay to embrace it the way that you want, through art, through poems, through coloring, through even just talking, even the way that you dress, that's also creativity. The way that you have like your room, and there's so many different ways to define it, but that's just my perception. So just embrace what you think is being creative.